You are not starting out very well, and you technically haven't even started yet. Atheism is the simple lack of belief in a god or gods, and forcing us to put that statement on a looping repeat every time someone makes a video objecting to or demonizing atheism is getting a bit tiresome. Argue with what we say we are, not with what you define us as. Nihilism is extreme, and while some atheists out there may adopt this sort of philosophy, atheism in and of itself is not synonymous with it.
Objective morality are morals that exist independently of human perceptions of them. They exist independently of the human mind. This would be an illustration of what objective morality is. Suppose Hitler had won World War II and brainwashed everyone into thinking that killing the Jews was right. Objective morality would say that in spite of the fact that everyone would think that killing Jews was right, it would still be wrong.
It does not take objective morality to come to that conclusion. In fact, it is not even necessary that a moral judgment be made to show Hitler's actions to be wrong. One simply needs to look at what effect his actions had upon society to see if they had a negative or positive effect. If his actions resulted in a negative effect, then his actions could be seen as wrong from a practical sense. Human beings are, like any animal, possessed of a need for survival and reproduction. We ensure our own survival through various ways and ensure the survival of the species through reproduction. Killing any number of us weakens our ability to reproduce, even if it is a slight and relatively insignificant loss. Killing a large number of us for any reason exacerbates an already existing weakness created by disease and natural disaster. Our survival can almost be seen as at odds with the natural world, considering Mother Nature's tendency to kill us by the billions with indifference. Any action that assists nature in this by prematurely ending the lives of millions of people can be seen as wrong.
So there are moral values and duties that are binding despite what people think of them. So people can be wrong about what they think is right. In other words, morality does not depend on people. It exists independently of people's perceptions.
Wrong again. Moral and immoral are titles given to actions by people that either do good or do harm. Seeing Hitler's actions did harm, his actions could, and rightfully so, are deemed immoral. Are they objectively immoral? No. But they did cause harm to the human species by terminating the lives of millions of people prematurely.
So, holding to objective morality, I can affirm that Hitler was wrong to think that he was right. So, morality does not depend on one's subjective perceptions, but is objectively real, and people can be wrong about what they think is right.
You deeming Hitler's actions as immoral is a subjective judgment. In fact, relying on God for this particular conclusion would be faulty, considering in the Bible he is depicted as ordering people to take the very same actions that Hitler did. This does not make you wrong, it just means that you are a person who sees the killing of millions of innocents as morally wrong. And seeing this is in accordance with human nature's predisposition to survival, you are correct on a practical sense as well.
Okay, we've defined what objective morality is. It is to think that the whole world can be wrong about certain moral questions, even though they think that they are right. Think back to the Nazi victory example. If Hitler had convinced everyone that killing Jews was right, would that make it right just because people think it's right? On atheism, the answer is, there is no right and wrong. Killing Jews is neither right nor wrong, and if Hitler thinks that killing Jewish babies in an oven is right, he's not wrong to think that he is right.
I thank you to let me represent the straw man here, because yours grossly misrepresents what atheism is. We do not believe a God is necessary to making a judgment call on the morality or immorality of an action. In fact, the practical argument I have already expressed does not even reflect, really, how we come to our conclusions. I can only speak for myself, so I will tell you how I decide morality or immorality. An immoral action is any action taken to willfully cause unjust harm. See my video, Evil Exists, Therefore God, for further explanation on this.
Of course, many will probably be enraged with what I just said, but keep following the argument and then critique my reasoning.
Of course people will be enraged with what you just said because you are conflating atheism with moral judgment. Because you have a severe lack of understanding of human psychology, atheism, and origins of morality, you believe that God did it and call it a day. If you see something that seems out of whack with that reasoning, you deem it as incorrect or lacking a moral compass. For you, God is a moral compass. For most atheists, the effect our actions have on others is our moral compass. Tell me, which one of these is more practically applied to human societies? An unbending rule that does not take into account moral progress, such as reaching the decision that slavery is wrong? Or morality subject to the judgment of people, which with every passing generation gains a better understanding of the world and universe around us, and how our actions affect everything else around us?
I've actually heard many atheists say that it's true. If Hitler thinks killing Jewish babies is right, there's nothing objectively wrong or right with that. And so Hitler's not actually wrong to think that he is right. Now I'll address the problem of subjective morality later.
And now you are taking that out of context. These statements are to show you the true origins of morality, but instead you seem to be implying this is atheists justifying Hitler's actions because morality doesn't exist. This is blatantly fallacious.
So here's why Hitler isn't wrong to think he's right on atheism. If we're thinking objectively and we presuppose God's non-existence, we're thinking of truths that exist independently of human thought. So if there is no God, we are to think outside of the human mind. It seems clear then that morality is just a construct that exists within the human mind. It has no objective foundation, as the universe does care whether a baby is shot or not.
That's right, the universe does not care. That is why millions of babies and children die every year. Human beings care, not because of some objective morality that you so clearly demonstrated does not exist by inadvertently pointing out the lack of caring demonstrated by your supposed morally objective God, but because we are an animal that cares about its own survival.
Therefore, there would be nothing objectively wrong with shooting a baby for pleasure, as right and wrong do not have any objective existence.
There you go again, misrepresenting the argument. You are either incredibly dishonest or incredibly ignorant. An atheist would not say that there is nothing wrong with shooting a baby for pleasure. At least no atheist I would want to leave in charge of the care of any living creature. Subjective morality is not the same thing as no morality. It simply means that humans deem what is and is not moral. This is demonstrated throughout history as more correct than any idea or argument put forth concerning the existence of objective morality. If Hitler's actions were objectively immoral, and that was a truth given to us by God, then his actions would most likely not have occurred because he would have been locked up by the very people who followed his orders. Instead, he convinced people that he was right, and because they subjectively agreed, the slaughter and torment of millions of people followed. Your own example that you insist on using, perhaps in an attempt to equate atheism with Hitler's actions, only serves to disprove the very point you are trying to make.
They only exist subjectively. Therefore, Hitler's standard of morality was no more right or wrong than your own. It was just different. Without any sort of objective good, you have to admit that objectively, and therefore in reality, there exists no good or no evil. Objectively, there would exist no superior moral worldviews, just different ones. Therefore, the atheist is forced to say that while he might feel that his morality is superior, in reality it is not. Neither is Hitler's morality inferior to your own. His conception of right and wrong is just different. At this point, the atheist might cling to some sort of subjective morality. This is riddled with problems.
First, I want to point out that you cut yourself off here, not me, and that was the end of this video, part 1 of your 2-part argument. Second, your false dichotomy doesn't force me to say anything other than point out that it is a false dichotomy. Morality being purely subjective does not mean that no one moral opinion is better than another. As I have already said, what is good for the species can be interpreted as the morally superior line of reasoning, and what is actively harmful to the species can be seen as morally inferior. Let's move on to part 2. I get the feeling that you're not going to do well here either. Atheism in and of itself is in fact amoral because it is not relevant to morality. Yet you take much longer than I just took to explain your opinion. Warning to viewers, the audio on his next video is a lot louder, so be ready to adjust the volume.
Atheism is amoral. Why did I just say that? That's kind of offensive, maybe.
No, it's not offensive at all, because it's true, unless, of course, you're about to put it into an offensive context.
Atheism is amoral because it implies moral relativism. Moral relativism is the belief that there is no objective standard of right and wrong, and therefore right and wrong is subjective and contingent upon the individual.
Do I really need to repeat myself? Atheism does not imply anything about morality. It is irrelevant to morality, as it is purely a lack of belief in a god or gods. The only people who would think it even implies anything about morality are those who claim morality comes from an objective source. People like you.
Let me explain this. Let's presuppose that there is no God for a moment. From an objective standpoint, morality would just exist in the minds of people. Right and wrong is the construct of the human mind. And therefore, from an objective standpoint, no moral worldview of any single individual is more right or more wrong than another. They're just different.
Yeah, you said this already, and I've already explained why you are incorrect. Morality, while subjective, is subjective not only to a single individual, but a group of individuals living together to form a society. This group must decide what is in the group's best interests, and form moral judgments based on this. They sometimes lack the foresight to see how what may seem good for them is actually harmful in the long term. The slavery in the U.S. is a good example of this lack of foresight, as it in turn created an entire culture of people born into poverty, generation after generation. But corrections are made, and the biblically promoted slavery became immoral by the judgment of the people, not God, and was abolished. And even then, they still did not reach a maximum level of efficiently good judgments regarding people who were once slaves and their successors. In fact, we still haven't reached a maximum level of efficiency in how we treat the poor among us.
Your moral worldview is no more right or wrong than Kim Jong-un's, it's just different. Now, at this point, many atheists will say, so, what's the problem? To me, my morality is more right and Un is wrong.
No, I think many atheists will say you are misrepresenting what we are saying, creating a convenient straw man for you to argue against. I thought I said I would be the straw man in this interaction. I thank you for not speaking for atheists. Oh, and don't assume I do either.
Think about what the word wrong means. The word wrong means incorrect. Now think about any other scenario wherein we use the word incorrect. If I fill in the incorrect answer on a history test, I am incorrect because my answer does not accord with the objective events of history.
You mean factual events of history, not objective. Think about what the word objective means. It means not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering or representing facts. The events in history are the facts. You recounting those facts can be either subjective or objective, not the events themselves.
If I am incorrect on a math test, then I am incorrect with respect to the objective principles of mathematics.
Come on, guy. Let's stop misusing and misrepresenting and just present our arguments, okay?
Think about subjective preferences. Suppose you like vanilla ice cream and I like cookie dough ice cream. I can never go up to your face and say, you're wrong to like cookie dough ice cream. If I did, I would probably be saying that as a joke. Likewise, you could like classical music and I like jazz. I can never call you an inferior patron of music, nor could I call your preference wrong. This is because there is no objectively right answer as to which genre of music is superior, or which ice cream flavor is superior. Since there is no objective standard for these things, preferences of music and ice cream flavors are opinions.
And that entire bit of your video was a false analogy. What one prefers in music or desserts has no relevancy within the realm of morality. Basically, you're reducing to absurdity your own straw man's argument to one person likes to spread disease, and another person likes to cure disease, and neither one is right or wrong. This is a continuation of your fallacious representation of the atheist argument. Why do you feel the need to do this? Is it because contending with the contextually correct meaning of our arguments leaves you in a position to admit the faulty logic behind the concept of objective morality?
Thus, if morality is subjective, it too reduces to an opinion. You cannot call anyone's choice of right and wrong incorrect. That's like calling someone's musical preference wrong. For the reasons discussed above, the terminology of being correct and incorrect is only relevant with respect to an objective standard.
No, because one can easily show why someone feeling that killing babies is not wrong is morally wrong by demonstrating the harm it causes. You're not going to give up on this false analogy, are you?
Suppose some wise guy comes along and says, well, I think that you can be subjectively incorrect. To me, the guy who likes vanilla ice cream is wrong to like vanilla ice cream. But in reality, he's not wrong. Well, then you are actually pulling a classic bait and switch. What you mean by wrong is not incorrect. You mean that his preferences don't suit yours. But surely you don't think there's anything actually wrong with that, do you?
You don't know what a bait and switch is, do you? It is where I present a false impression of something, usually something I'm trying to sell, and then replace it with an inferior substitute. Like you baited your audience with the true statement, atheism is amoral, as your title, but switched to an increasingly nonsensical and fallacious argument promoting the false idea of objective morality. You sneaky bastard.
If morality works the same way, then the same rules apply. Nothing is actually right or wrong, that is, correct and incorrect morally. But if that's true, you have just as much right to condemn Hitler's sense of right and wrong as I do to condemn your preferences of ice cream or music genre. You and Hitler may have different preferences, but in what sense can you say that his preference is incorrect without an objective standard?
I highly doubt that anyone is even suggesting that morality works the same way as personal preferences in regards to ice cream. When I say that morality is subjective, I mean subjective to not only an individual, but the group of individuals as well. U.S. laws are subjective to the group of people who created those laws. They are not objective laws derived from an objective lawgiver.
In the absence of God, there is no basis by which to condemn other people's moral worldviews. Without that basis, the atheist is left saying that nothing is right or wrong morally. He is stripped of his logical basis to be outraged over other people's moral choices. Atheism implies moral relativism, which in turn implies moral nihilism. I, for one, refuse to think that a man who can torture children has merely a different moral preference than my own.
First, as I said I don't know how many times already, atheism implies nothing but a lack of belief in God or gods. You applying more to that only shows the weakness of your argument against atheism, which isn't even what you are arguing against. Second, what you want to believe is irrelevant. Truth be told, we all have different moral values, and whether or not you agree with mine is irrelevant, and attempting to tell me yours are right and mine are wrong because you get yours from a book that promotes several things that are considered immoral by our subjective modern human standards makes me question your morality. I am reminded of a conversation between Eric Hovind and Ray Comfort wherein they both admitted that they'd be engaging in all levels of criminal activity if it weren't for their religious beliefs. Are you so truly lost when it comes to the concept of right and wrong that you need to be told what they are by religious dogma?
That man is wrong to think he is right, period. Atheism would force me to refrain from passing judgment on such a man. This is a price that no one should be willing to pay.
No, it wouldn't. It would only force you to admit that your judgment is based on your personal feelings of his actions as opposed to some objective morality giver who doesn't even agree with you. You know who does agree with you that Hitler's actions were wrong? Most atheists. Yeah. Isn't that just weird how the people you agree with, atheists, do not believe in the God that you believe in but disagree with on the morality of genocide?
Finish him!
Atheism is amoral. Not because the individual atheist is amoral, but because atheism is irrelevant to moral judgments. Atheism, for the last time in this video, is nothing more than a lack of belief in God or gods. Some atheists are willing to say there is no such thing as a God, while others only claim that specific gods are falsifiable. You falsely conflate atheism to morality, and this is where your line of logic fails. Considering your whole argument is based on this, it fails from the beginning. I think you know this, given your use of false analogies and false dichotomies. You refuse to contend with the ideas atheists present in the context they intend, and instead create a straw man making the same claims but with a differing context. You do all of this not to contend with atheism, but the idea of subjective morality. I was first confused by this, by why you would falsely equate atheism to moral judgment. But the more I listened to you, the more I understood. For you, the idea that objective morality does not exist and that all morality is subjective shows your God to be inconsequential to moral judgment. Your firm belief that your own morality is guided by an objective morality giver lets you walk around believing that your moral judgments are superior to someone else's should they not follow the same God you do. Your own ego gets in the way of you seeing the truth. Your own ego cannot survive the idea that you may in fact be incorrect on some moral judgments you make. This is why you use the Hitler example, because only a sociopath would disagree with the idea that what he did was wrong, and so sane and moral people are forced to agree with that conclusion, and somehow you think this means they are forced to agree with your conclusion on how you make that moral judgment. Unfortunately for you, however, your own example disproves your conclusion that your morality comes from a superior objective source because you actually disagree with that source on the morality of your example.